Hello friends, today let's inquire about intelligence and the bodily pleasures. In the previous sessions, we explored the question, what is the purpose of life? Although we did not arrive at a final answer, our inquiry suggested that much of our life revolves around seeking pleasure, happiness, and joy. We also saw that these experiences are influenced by our actions, thoughts, habits, choices, and behaviors. Therefore, if we wish to understand pleasure, happiness, and joy more deeply, we must first understand ourselves. In the last session, we explored self-awareness and learned how to observe ourselves through our body, thoughts, feelings, emotions, habits, choices, and intentions. This naturally brings us to the next question. Is observation enough, or does something else emerge from observation? What exactly is intelligence? Is intelligence merely knowledge and information, or is it something deeper? In this session, we will explore intelligence and see how it can help us understand our body more clearly. Now let us explore another important question. What is intelligence? When we hear the word intelligence, most of us think of knowledge, education, memory, or the ability to solve problems. But are intelligence and knowledge really the same thing? A person may have read hundreds of books and accumulated vast amounts of information. Yet if that person does not understand himself or understand life, will that knowledge necessarily lead to wise action? We have all seen highly educated people make unwise decisions, and people with little formal education display remarkable wisdom. So perhaps intelligence and knowledge are not exactly the same thing. Intelligence is the understanding that emerges from self-awareness. It reveals subtle insights about ourselves and life, enabling deeper understanding and right action. One of the interesting things about intelligence is that it often brings insights. An insight is not something we force through analysis or memorization. It appears when we observe carefully and understand deeply. These insights can reveal something about ourselves, our relationships, our habits, our body, our mind, and life itself. And when an insight is genuine, it often leads naturally to wiser action. Now the question is, why can't we rely on our ancestors and religions for insights? If we observe life carefully, we find that everything is constantly changing. People change. Relationships change. Culture changes. Technology changes. Life itself is always changing. In such a world, can fixed knowledge alone be sufficient? Or must there be an intelligence that helps us understand each situation freshly as it unfolds? Also, these insights may vary between person to person, and therefore it is necessary to be aware of ourselves and find out our own personal insights. This is one reason why our three principles are so important: direct experience, questioning, and not blindly accepting ideas from others. Knowledge certainly has its place. We can learn a great deal from books, teachers, experts, and traditions. But perhaps intelligence begins when we do not merely repeat what we have learned. Perhaps it begins when we observe, question, investigate, and discover for ourselves. If intelligence helps us understand ourselves and life more clearly, where should we begin? Should we begin with complex theories and philosophies, or with something that is available to us every moment of our lives? Perhaps the most direct place to begin is the body. After all, many of our experiences of pleasure arise through the body: hunger, thirst, rest, movement, comfort, and relaxation. But how well do we actually understand our body? Do we truly listen to its signals, or do we mostly follow habits, desires, and conditioning? When we feel tired, do we rest because the body needs rest, or because the mind wants comfort? When we eat, are we responding to genuine hunger or to craving? Could intelligence help us distinguish between the needs of the body and the desires of the mind? Let us investigate by looking more closely at the body and its relationship with pleasure. Let us begin our inquiry with the body and its relationship with pleasure. When we hear the word pleasure, we often think of entertainment, luxury, or indulgence. But perhaps pleasure is much broader than that. Pleasure includes all pleasant bodily sensations: eating when hungry, drinking when thirsty, resting when tired, stretching after sitting for a long time, enjoying warmth on a cold day, or feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep. Is pleasure bad? Many traditions have treated pleasure with suspicion. But let us question this carefully. If pleasure were inherently bad, why would nature have built it into life? Every living being seems to move toward pleasant experiences and away from unpleasant ones. Pleasure appears to be a natural part of life. Yet there is an interesting observation to make. Most of us rarely notice these simple pleasures. We eat without fully tasting. We walk without feeling the body move. We sit, work, and perform countless activities without being aware of the bodily sensations involved. Our attention is usually occupied by thoughts, worries, plans, memories, and desires. In a sense, we live more in our minds than in our bodies. As a result, we gradually lose sensitivity to the body's signals and become disconnected from it. Perhaps one of the insights intelligence reveals is that the body is constantly communicating with us. But to hear these signals, we must first learn to place our attention in the body. The more attention we give to the body, the more sensitive it becomes, and the easier it is to recognize its needs. To explore this more deeply, let us look at some simple examples from everyday life. Sleeping, eating, exercise, and relaxation. These are activities we all engage in, and each of them can teach us something about pleasure and the body. But before we proceed, let us ask an important question. If pleasure is natural and valuable, what happens when we seek too much of it? What happens when enjoyment turns into craving? What happens when a natural need becomes an addiction? Perhaps understanding the difference between the body's needs and the mind's desires is one of the first insights intelligence can reveal. Let us begin with sleep. Have you ever noticed that a good night's sleep brings a subtle sense of pleasure and well-being? When we sleep well, the body feels refreshed, rejuvenated, and full of energy. In my own observation, sleep is one of nature's ways of healing and restoring the body. But how much sleep does a person actually need? Some people say 6 hours. Others say 8. Books, experts, and studies may provide useful guidelines, but can a fixed number determine the needs of every individual on every day? If we observe carefully, we may find that the body's need for sleep varies. A day filled with physical work may create a different need than a day spent resting. Age, health, activity, and many other factors may also play a role. Perhaps this is where intelligence becomes important. Instead of relying entirely on external rules, can we learn to listen to the body's signals? The more attention we place in the body, the more sensitive we become to its needs. We begin to recognize when the body genuinely needs rest and when it has had enough. Have you also noticed what happens when sleep is insufficient? The body feels tired, the mind becomes dull, and even simple activities can feel difficult. On the other hand, oversleeping often leaves us feeling sluggish and lacking energy. Both extremes seem to have consequences. Could it be that the body already knows how much sleep it needs, and that our task is simply to become sensitive enough to listen? Perhaps one of the insights intelligence reveals is that the body has needs, while the mind often has desires. Understanding the difference between the two may be the beginning of understanding pleasure itself. Let us look at another example: exercise and movement. Have you ever noticed that when your body is free from illness and discomfort, there is a subtle sense of well-being present? It is not an intense pleasure, and because it is subtle, we often overlook it. In fact, most of us notice the body only when something goes wrong. When there is pain, sickness, or discomfort, the body immediately captures our attention. But when the body is healthy, we rarely pay attention to it. Perhaps this happens because we have become disconnected from the body. Our attention is usually occupied by thoughts, plans, worries, and desires. As a result, we lose sensitivity to the body's signals. But what happens if we begin placing our attention in the body more often? What happens if we become aware of the body while sitting, walking, working, or resting? In my own observation, as attention returns to the body, sensitivity gradually increases. We begin to notice subtle signals that were previously ignored. For example, Have you ever been sitting in the same position for a long time and suddenly felt the need to stretch? Where did that signal come from? The body was communicating all along, but perhaps we noticed it only when the signal became strong enough. As sensitivity increases, the body often begins to guide us naturally toward movement. We may feel the need to stretch, walk, run, practice yoga, or engage in some other form of exercise. Rather than forcing the body according to an external rule, we begin listening to what the body is actually asking for. But let us also question this. If exercise is beneficial, does that mean more exercise is always better? Can exercise, like other pleasures, be taken to an extreme? Can the desire to exercise become stronger than the actual needs of the body? Perhaps intelligence helps us see the difference. The body has its needs, and when those needs are met, it functions well. But when desire takes over, even something beneficial can become excessive. Let us keep this question open as we continue our inquiry. Let us take another example. Eating. Few things give as much immediate pleasure to the body as food. Hunger is uncomfortable, and eating brings relief, satisfaction, and pleasure. Without food, the body cannot survive. But we also know that eating too much can lead to obesity, disease, and many other health problems. So somewhere between too little and too much, there seems to be a balance. But who decides that balance? How much food does a person actually need? What is the right food? Should everyone eat 3 meals a day? 4 meals a day? Can a fixed rule apply equally to every person, every body, and every situation? Perhaps intelligence invites us to ask a different question. Instead of relying entirely on external rules, can we learn to listen to the body's own signals? The body communicates through hunger, fullness, energy levels, and countless other sensations. But are we paying attention? In my own observation, one reason we lose touch with these signals is that we often eat without awareness. We may be watching television, scrolling through our phones, talking, or thinking about something else while eating. As a result, we miss the body's signal that it has had enough. The need may already be satisfied, but the mind continues seeking more. Have you noticed that sometimes it is not hunger that makes us continue eating, but the memory of taste? The body may no longer need food, yet the mind remembers the pleasure and wants more. This may be one of the first places where we can clearly see the difference between need and desire. The body's need is limited. Once it is satisfied, the signal stops. But desire, driven by memory and pleasure, may continue long after the need has been met. Perhaps one of the insights intelligence reveals is that many of our difficulties begin when we lose the ability to distinguish between the body's genuine needs and the mind's endless desires. The more attention we place in the body, the more sensitive we become to its signals, and the easier it becomes to recognize when enough is enough. Let us look at one more example. Relaxation. We often think of pleasure in terms of eating, sleeping, or entertainment. But can relaxation also bring a subtle form of pleasure? Have you ever consciously relaxed your body? Not by sleeping, but by simply sitting quietly and allowing each part of the body to release unnecessary tension. What happens when the shoulders relax? What happens when the face relaxes? What happens when the entire body is allowed to rest without effort? And what happens when we simply watch the breath? When we quietly observe the in-breath and the out-breath without trying to control it? Have you ever experimented with this? Does it produce a subtle sense of comfort, ease, or well-being? In my own observation, conscious relaxation seems to restore energy in a different way than sleep. Sleep is necessary when the body is tired. But even during the day, a few moments of relaxation can sometimes refresh both the body and the mind. Perhaps this is because much of our energy is consumed by unnecessary tension that we carry without realizing it. Once again, intelligence invites us to investigate rather than accept conclusions. If relaxation is beneficial, does that mean more relaxation is always better? Can relaxation become another form of escape? Can the desire for comfort become stronger than the body's actual need for rest? Perhaps the same principle appears here as well. The body has genuine needs, and when those needs are met, there is a natural sense of pleasure and well-being. But when desire takes over, even something beneficial can become excessive. The challenge is not to reject pleasure, but to understand it. And the more attention we place in the body, the more sensitive we become to its signals, making that understanding possible. As we reflect on sleep, exercise, eating, and relaxation, an interesting question begins to emerge. Why do we so often overdo things? Why do we eat more than the body needs? Why do we sleep longer than necessary? Why do we sometimes exercise excessively or seek endless comfort and relaxation? Perhaps one possible answer is desire. When a genuine bodily need is satisfied, it naturally brings pleasure. Hunger is satisfied through eating. Tiredness is satisfied through sleep. Physical inactivity is balanced through movement and exercise. In each case, the body seems to have a natural need, and when that need is met, a sense of well-being arises. But what happens after the need has already been satisfied? Why do we sometimes continue? Could it be that at a certain point the body's need ends, but the mind's desire continues? This is not something to accept as a theory. Observe it for yourself. When eating, can you notice the moment the body has had enough? When resting, can you notice the moment the body feels refreshed? What happens after that point? Perhaps one of the insights intelligence reveals is the difference between need and desire. Needs seem to arise from the body, while desires often arise from memory, imagination, habit, or the pursuit of more pleasure. The body usually communicates through signals. The challenge is that we often miss these signals because our attention is elsewhere. This is why placing attention in the body is so important. The more attention we give to the body, the more sensitive it becomes. As sensitivity increases, we begin to recognize the body's signals more clearly. We can sense when we are genuinely hungry, genuinely tired, genuinely in need of movement, or genuinely in need of rest. Another interesting observation is that pleasure often seems to depend on a natural rhythm. Food tastes most pleasurable when there is genuine hunger. Sleep feels most satisfying when there is genuine tiredness. Relaxation feels most rewarding after effort. Perhaps the body functions through a natural cycle, and pleasure is part of that cycle. Of course, this raises another question. If desire can sometimes lead us away from the body's actual needs, then what exactly is desire? How does it arise? How does it influence our thoughts, choices, and actions? To understand that more deeply, we may need to investigate the mind itself. That is where our inquiry will continue in the next session. Thank you.